Don't shop at these 5 clothing stores until you hear this. I'm not joking. Before you buy anything else, you need to know what's really going on behind the scenes of some of the biggest brands on the high street and online. Because the stores we're about to talk about aren't just a bit questionable. Some of them have been caught cutting corners so badly, it borders on dangerous. Others are quietly doing things that would make you rethink half your wardrobe. And one of them, let's just say the truth behind their too cheap to be real prices, hits way darker than a discount tag ever could. These shops all have one thing in common. They look harmless, even fun on the surface. Trendy websites, huge sales, cute outfits, fast delivery. But underneath, the stories shift from shady to unethical to downright alarming. By the end of this countdown, you might start seeing your favorite clothing stores in a completely different light. And you might realize that some of the good deals you've been getting weren't really deals at all. So let's start at number 5, the brand that mastered looking sustainable while allegedly bending the rules behind the scenes and hoping nobody would notice. Number 5, ASOS. ASOS used to feel like the safe option. Trendy but not chaotic, affordable but not suspiciously cheap, modern but not fast fashion gone wild. It was the store you shopped at when you wanted something new without diving into the messy world of ultra-fast brands. But behind that polished website, and those endless, sustainable edit banners, something very different was happening, and regulators eventually called them out for it. Let's start with the scandal that cracked the glossy image wide open, the greenwashing investigation that blew up online. In 2022, the UK's Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, the same regulators who go after major corporate misconduct, launched a full investigation into ASOS for one reason: misleading customers about how eco-friendly their clothes were. Not a rumor, not a blog post. A government investigation into whether one of Britain's biggest retailers was essentially lying to customers who wanted to shop responsibly. ASOS had created its Responsible Edit and Eco Edit collections, entire sections of the website meant to reassure shoppers that these clothes were better for the planet. But here's the punchline. Regulators said a lot of the items in those sections weren't meaningfully different from the rest of the catalog. Some pieces were labeled sustainable simply because they had a small percentage of recycled material, sometimes so tiny it made no difference to environmental impact. Others used vague language like better for the planet, with zero clear explanation of how. Regulators even warned that customers were being duped into paying more for clothes that aren't actually kinder to the environment. That's a direct government quote. This wasn't just embarrassing, it shattered trust. Because if a brand is willing to mislead customers about something as serious as sustainability, what else are they stretching the truth about? And the fallout was immediate. Thousands of shoppers began questioning ASOS's ethical claims. Suddenly, the brand that marketed itself as the future of responsible fashion started looking more like a company trying to ride a trend it didn't actually believe in. That's bad enough. But it wasn't the only issue hiding under the surface. The returns crisis. Nobody talks about. ASOS has one of the highest return rates in UK online fashion. Some analysts say up to 25% of everything bought from ASOS gets sent back. But here's what most people don't know. Returned items often don't get resold. Why? Because when you buy online in huge volumes, the return system becomes chaotic. Items come back worn, damaged, missing tags, creased, unclean, or simply not worth reprocessing. Handling each piece costs time and labor. And for a company already struggling with losses, the easiest option is disposal. Former warehouse workers have anonymously said that mountains of returns are often sorted into keep, resell, and waste. A large chunk lands in the last pile, meaning every time you return that 12-pound dress, it may not go back on the website. It may go straight into the bin or be shipped out as bulk waste to other countries. The irony? The brand accused of greenwashing also contributes to textile waste on a massive scale. And speaking of the warehouse, inside the ASOS worker complaints, ASOS's huge distribution center in Barnsley has been the subject of multiple worker complaints over the years. Excessive surveillance, unrealistic packing targets, exhausting shifts, injuries from repetitive tasks, intense pressure during peak seasons. A major investigation described the conditions as grueling and relentless, comparing parts of the facility to a digital age sweatshop. ASOS denied the harshest claims, but as more workers spoke out, the pattern became impossible to ignore. For a brand that markets itself as youthful and progressive, the behind-the-scenes picture looks a lot more old-fashioned, and not in a charming way. The quality slide that customers noticed before ASOS did. Around 2020 to 2023, complaints about ASOS quality skyrocketed online. Reddit threads, TikTok reviews, Trustpilot rants. Common themes, thinner fabrics, pieces shrinking after one wash, colors fading, seams unraveling, and items looking nothing like the photos. In other words, people were paying mid-range prices for fast fashion durability. ASOS reacted with vague promises about improving standards, but the damage was done. When thousands of customers are saying the same thing, it's not a coincidence. The financial cracks showing through. Then came the numbers. In 2023, ASOS posted huge losses, over £290 million. The company shut down warehouses, fired staff, and admitted publicly that it had lost control of key parts of its operations. Combine the losses with the returns waste, the environmental investigations, the declining quality, the worker complaints, and the misleading sustainability claims. And suddenly, ASOS goes from safe shopping option to a brand struggling to stay credible, ethical, and profitable. ASOS isn't the worst offender on this list. Not even close, but it's one of the most surprising. Because the fall didn't happen loudly, it happened quietly, underneath a website designed to look clean, modern, and responsible. And if that's number 5, wait until you see number 4, because this next brand wasn't just investigated, it was exposed. And what people found inside their supply chain sent shockwaves through the entire retail world. Number 4, Boohoo. Boohoo is the kind of brand that sells you a fantasy, endless styles, endless colors, endless trends, all for the price of a takeaway. It doesn't just update its catalog, it floods it. Hundreds of new items a week, sometimes hundreds a day. It feels fun. It feels exciting. It feels like you're getting away with something every time you check out. But behind the flashing discount banners and the OMG $6 dresses TikTok hauls, something else was happening. Something that would eventually unravel the shiny world Boohoo built and reveal the machinery that kept everything running at impossible speed. And the unraveling began with one investigation that the fashion industry still hasn't recovered from. The scandal that blew the doors wide open. In 2020, an undercover journalist stepped inside factories producing clothes for Boohoo. What the hidden camera captured looked less like modern manufacturing, and more like the kind of exploitation consumers assumed disappeared decades ago. Workers were earning around £3.50 an hour, barely enough to cover a bus fare, let alone a life. Some said they were paid cash in envelopes. Others described supervisors who warned them not to speak, not to complain, not to mention anything if auditors showed up. The buildings themselves were cramped, overheated, and unsafe. Blocked exits, poor ventilation, zero oversight. And here's the part that turned a factory scandal into a global headline. The clothes being sewn in those conditions were being sold online as new arrivals within days. The shockwave was instant. Major retailers cut ties with Boohoo. The company's value dropped by over £1 billion in less than a week. People who had been filling carts with $10 outfits suddenly found themselves asking a question Boohoo never wanted them to ask. How does this brand move so fast and sell so cheap? And once the question was out there, reporters started digging deeper. The supply chain that nobody could fully trace. Boohoo wasn't just using a handful of factories. It was using networks, sprawling, tangled networks across the UK, Pakistan, Morocco, China, and several regions in South Asia. The same patterns appeared over and over again. Overcrowded workshops, low pay, rushed orders, subcontracting that spiraled out of control. Suppliers would take on orders they couldn't realistically fulfill, then quietly pass work to shadow factories with no documentation, no safety standards, and no audits. These were the places nobody was meant to see, the places that produced clothes at the impossible pace Boohoo demanded. It wasn't one bad supplier, it was the business model. When Boohoo eventually hired auditors to investigate, the findings were grim. More than half of their supplier base failed basic international standards. Some factories lacked proper fire safety measures. Others had incomplete records or no records at all. One review even suggested Boohoo didn't fully know how many factories were producing its clothes. Imagine running a global fashion empire so fast that you can't even map your own supply chain. That's Boohoo. The quality collapse customers noticed first. While the behind-the-scenes problems spread across headlines, another quieter issue was unfolding on the consumer side. Complaints were pouring in, stitching coming loose after a single wear, colors bleeding in the wash, fabric so thin you could read through them. Customers began joking that Boohoo clothes lasted one night out and a regret. But the joke hid a truth. The clothes were being made too fast. When you push factories beyond their limit, quality becomes collateral damage. Cheap becomes disposable. Disposable becomes normal. And Boohoo leaned into that cycle with everything it had. The environmental cost that's impossible to ignore. Then there's the waste, mountains of it. Boohoo's business thrives on micro-trend consumption. Buy it, wear it twice, throw it out, buy more. Items returned in poor condition don't make it back onto shelves. Many end up as textile waste, burned or buried, because it's cheaper than repairing or reselling them. Every $8 dress comes with hidden costs that never make it onto the website: worker exhaustion, textile pollution, and massive carbon output from shipping millions of tiny parcels around the world. Boohoo wants to sell itself as fast, as fun, as affordable luxury. But when the curtain was pulled back, what people saw wasn't luxury at all. It was a machine running so fast that everything inside began to break. The workers, the clothes, the supply chain, the trust. If Boohoo taught the fashion world anything, it's this: cheap clothes are never really cheap. And if Boohoo's downfall shocked you, wait until you see number 3, because this next brand didn't just lose control, it lost the very identity that made it iconic. Number 3, Zara. Zara isn't just a clothing store, it's the blueprint, the original fast fashion giant. The company that turned runway looks into mall outfits in 3 weeks. For years, Zara was the cool older sibling of the fashion industry, the brand that somehow felt trendier, cleaner, more elevated than the chaos of ultra-cheap competitors. But behind the minimalist storefronts and the polished advertising, Zara has been carrying a stack of controversies that slowly caught up with it, and some of them are so specific, so shocking, and so bizarre that they barely feel real. Let's start with the scandal that still haunts the brand: the "Help Me" notes sewn into clothes. In 2017, shoppers in Istanbul started finding handwritten notes tucked inside Zara pockets. Not tags, not receipts. Actual notes allegedly written by garment workers. They said things like, "I made this item you are going to buy, but I didn't get paid for it." These weren't random activists planting messages. They were workers from a factory that Zara had used for years before abruptly ending the contract. According to the workers, the factory owner disappeared without paying wages, months of wages, leaving hundreds of people stranded. Desperate, they turned to Zara customers as a last resort. This wasn't a rumor. It happened in multiple Zara stores, and it exposed something Zara had always avoided talking about: just how fragile and outsourced their supply chain really was. But that was only the beginning. The Brazil slave labor case. One of Zara's most notorious scandals happened in Brazil, when inspectors found workers sewing Zara clothing in what authorities described as conditions analogous to slavery. People working 16-hour days, children involved in the production line, workers living in cramped, unsafe apartments with boarded-up windows, sewing Zara clothes for pennies. Brazil's Ministry of Labor fined Zara's parent company, ordered reforms, and publicly named Zara as part of the problem, something that almost never happens at this scale. Zara promised to fix things, but investigators later said the company had partial responsibility for failing to monitor its contractors. Again, this wasn't generic fast fashion controversy. This was Zara specifically. And it didn't stop there. The Syrian children discovery. In 2016, a BBC investigation found Syrian refugee children working illegally in factories in Turkey, producing clothes for Zara and other brands. Some of the kids were as young as 12, earning pennies to iron and sew adult clothing. Zara said they were concerned and would investigate, but organizations monitoring the situation said child labor in Zara's Turkish supply chain had been on their radar for years. The message was becoming clear: Zara's supply chain wasn't just fragile, it was porous. Meanwhile, the massive environmental footprint they tried to hide. Zara markets itself as sustainable and eco-conscious, but multiple environmental groups have challenged those claims. Unlike ultra-fast brands, Zara doesn't drop 10,000 new pieces a week, but it still produces hundreds of millions of items a year. And here's the problem unique to Zara. Most of Zara's cotton comes from high-impact regions tied to forced labor investigations, water depletion, and pesticide overuse. Several watchdog groups have flagged Zara specifically for sourcing from regions linked to human rights violations, claims Zara denies, but the investigations keep resurfacing. And then there's the waste. Unlike some brands that donate unsold items, Zara has been accused repeatedly of destroying unsold clothes, especially during older seasons when new collections must rotate in. Former employees have revealed that piles of unsold stock were quietly dumped or destroyed to make room for new lines. Zara doesn't publish transparent data on its waste, one of the biggest red flags in modern retail, and customers started noticing something else too. The quality shift that nobody wanted to believe. Around 2020 to 2024, complaints about Zara quality exploded across social media. People noticed thinner fabrics, shoes falling apart after a few wears, coats pilling instantly, items shrinking, stretching, warping, and clothes that looked luxurious online but flimsy in hand. It felt like the Zara people loved in the early 2000s wasn't the Zara selling clothes today. The trend cycle got shorter, the quality dipped, the prices rose, and customers started asking the question Zara never wanted them to ask. What exactly am I paying for? Zara still has the aesthetic. It still has the brand power, but the scandals, the child labor investigations, the unpaid worker notes, the Brazil case, the environmental red flags, the rising prices, and the falling quality have all piled up into a picture that's impossible to ignore. Zara isn't collapsing overnight, but it is declining. Quietly, steadily, and globally. And if Zara is slipping this hard, wait until you see number 2. Because the next brand isn't just controversial, it's chaotic, unpredictable, and so tangled in lawsuits and safety warnings that entire governments have started paying attention. Number 2, Temu. Temu arrived like a shopping fever dream. An app packed with prices so outrageously low, people thought it had to be a glitch. $3 dresses, $2 gadgets, 90% off flash sales popping up every hour like a game. It didn't feel like a store. It felt like someone accidentally opened the back door of the internet and Temu slipped through with a bag full of unbelievable deals. But once you look behind the bright orange logo and the carnival of coupons, the story flips fast. And it begins with something most shoppers never think about: safety. The safety issues, hiding behind those $3 prices. Temu's marketplace works differently from traditional retailers. Instead of stocking products or working with vetted brands, Temu lets thousands of anonymous sellers upload items directly from factories. No testing, no verification, no meaningful oversight. And that's why consumer safety agencies across multiple countries have flagged Temu for suspiciously high numbers of defective, mislabeled, and outright dangerous products. Electricals overheating, kids' toys with choking hazards, cosmetics with no ingredient lists, clothes dyed with chemicals that rub off onto skin. If something goes wrong, the listing quietly disappears, and the same item reappears under a new seller name. It's not just cheap, it's unregulated. The data collection that feels a little too smart. Then comes the part that makes tech analysts nervous: Temu's data practices. People have reverse engineered the app and found tracking code woven into nearly every corner. Recording taps, scrolling behavior, how long you pause on a product, even the way you swipe. Temu doesn't just watch what you buy, it watches how you think. That's why the app feels addictive. That's why it gets you so quickly. That's why you open Temu just to browse and somehow lose an hour inside it. It's engineered to learn you faster than you learn the app. The shipping loophole. Temu exploits to stay cheap. Temu's prices aren't magic. They're strategic. The company ships millions of tiny parcels individually, slipping them through an international trade loophole that lets low-value packages enter countries without import taxes. Domestic retailers have to follow regulations. Temu slides under them. That's how a $3 dress stays $3. Not because it's efficient, but because it's untaxed. And no, Temu didn't invent this loophole, but they perfected it on a scale no one has ever seen. The supply chain no one can see, and that's the problem. Peek behind Temu's storefront, and you'll find a supply chain so vast and so chaotic that transparency becomes impossible. Factories produce at breakneck speed. Orders shift constantly. Subcontracting is everywhere. Oversight is rare. And many of these regions have long histories of labor violations, the kind no app wants to publish on its homepage. Temu insists it audits suppliers, but with thousands of independent sellers and almost no public reporting, verifying anything is nearly impossible. Temu wasn't built for accountability. It was built for volume, the waste crisis that happens after delivery. And then comes the environmental fallout. Temu's products don't last. Clothes rip, electronics break, materials fall apart. Items often go straight from your mailbox to the trash. Multiply that by millions of orders a day, and Temu becomes one of the fastest growing engines of global waste. A conveyor belt, moving products from factories to landfills at terrifying speed. Temu frames itself as fun, easy, harmless, a little shopping treat, a quick dopamine hit. But beneath every deal is a system built on loopholes, unsafe goods, aggressive data tracking, and items that die faster than the trends that inspired them. And if this is number 2, then you already know what's coming. Number 1 is the brand that didn't just shape the fast fashion crisis, it became the crisis. Number 1. Shein. Shein isn't just a fashion brand anymore. It's a phenomenon. The app people scroll the way they scroll TikTok. The brand behind those 100-piece hauls. The company that drops new items so fast, it makes other fast fashion giants look slow motion. Shein built an empire by turning clothing into content, trends into daily updates, and shopping into a game. But behind the fun, colorful chaos lies the darkest story in modern fashion. And it starts where no customer ever sees, inside the factories, the factory footage that shocked the world. When a documentary crew went undercover inside Shein-connected factories in Guangzhou, what they captured didn't look like a workplace. It looked like exhaustion turned into an assembly line. Workers sewing for 17 to 18 hours a day, 1 day off a month, sleeping in cramped dorms, eating between tasks, no real breaks, no real rest, no real choice. One worker said on camera, "There's no such thing as Sundays here." Some workers were paid just over 2 cents per garment. 2 cents. And if they made a mistake, penalties so harsh that one error could wipe out an entire day's earnings. This wasn't one rogue supplier. This was the beating heart of ultra-fast fashion. Speed above safety, volume above humanity. When the footage went public, Shein expressed deep concern, promised investigations, and announced reforms. But the system didn't slow down, because if Shein slows down, its entire empire collapses. The chemical tests that raised global alarms. Then came the lab reports. Environmental groups in Europe sent Shein clothing, especially kids' items, to independent labs. The results were disturbing. Some garments contained illegal levels of hazardous chemicals, phthalates, lead, and PFAS, the so-called forever chemicals linked to reproductive issues, cancer, and developmental problems. Certain Shein jackets exceeded legal chemical limits by thousands of %. These aren't maybe harmful someday substances. These are chemicals scientists have been warning governments about for years. Shein said it would remove the affected items. But this wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the second. This is a pattern, one that comes from a supply chain moving so fast. Chemicals become afterthoughts. The design theft machine. No artist can compete with. But if the labor scandals and chemical findings weren't enough, Shein had another controversy right behind them: design theft. Artists across the world, illustrators, jewelry makers, small clothing brands, began posting side-by-side images showing their work copied almost stitch for stitch, line for line, not inspired by, duplicated. Some creators claimed Shein scraped their designs directly from social media. Others filed lawsuits. Some watched their original work disappear online under a flood of Shein knockoffs. It wasn't happening occasionally. It was happening so often that designers started calling Shein the black hole of creativity. Everything goes in. Nothing comes out with credit. For the small artists Shein copied, it wasn't just theft. It was erasure, the data question nobody can ignore. Behind the scenes, Shein is also a data collection machine. The app tracks behavior with eerie precision. How long you stare at an item, how fast you scroll, what colors you pause on, what patterns you like without even knowing you like them. It learns you, then it sells to you, then it overwhelms you with new in-drops until your dopamine can't keep up. It's not just fast fashion, it's engineered addiction, the final reveal. When you combine everything, the labor violations, the chemical findings, the design theft, the environmental fallout, the data surveillance, Shein stops looking like a brand and starts looking like a system, a machine designed to move so fast that ethics, safety, creativity, and sustainability don't stand a chance. Shein didn't break fashion. It broke the idea of what fashion is allowed to be. And that's why it sits at number 1, the most controversial, the most influential, the most dangerous fast fashion giant on the planet. When you zoom out and look at all 5 of these brands side by side, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. It's not just cheap clothes. It's not just fast shipping. It's not just trends moving quicker than we can keep up. It's an entire system built on speed over quality, loopholes over responsibility, and volume over everything else. ASOS hiding behind sustainability labels that didn't mean what they claimed. Boohoo building an empire on burnout speed production. Zara quietly slipping while scandals piled up behind its minimal storefronts. Temu flooding the world with products so cheap they barely survive a week. and Shane, the fastest, biggest, most controversial machine fashion has ever seen. Together, they've created a world where clothing is disposable, workers are invisible, and the price tag rarely reflects the real cost. And the truth is simple: the danger isn't the clothes. It's the trust we keep giving to companies who haven't earned it. So before you buy that next quick haul, that next last-minute outfit, that next little bargain that feels too good to be true, just pause, ask questions, look closer, because once you see what's happening behind the curtain, it becomes impossible to unsee. If this deep dive opened your eyes or made you reconsider a brand you thought you knew, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more exposés just like this, and let me know in the comments which store shocked you the most or which one I should investigate next.